Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. So over the past month or so, I have been on a real art book kick. I don't know what it is, but lately most of the things that I really want to buy are art books. I have like an entire Amazon wish list of art books that I can't afford. And in time, I definitely like to build up my collection of these books, but over the past few weeks, I've spent a while looking at the various art books of one Shigenori Soejima. You may know him as being the artist behind Persona 3, 4, 5, Catherine, various Persona spin-offs. The man's a legend, and I figured I'd kind of pay my respects to him by looking at 15 of my favorite works that he's done. Now granted, this is a somewhat loose top 15, it was honestly very difficult even picking these, so this is a video that I would definitely expect a sequel for down the line. So yeah, let's check out some of this art. First up is this piece from Persona 3, which has always stood out as being one of my favorite visuals from the game. I think it's the perfect but subtle blend of the school life aspects along with the supernatural elements that does it for me. In the background, we can of course see the rows of school desks in a classroom, alluding to the school setting and daily life aspect. Then in the center, we can see the protagonist Junpei Yukari, as well as Thanatos just hovering above. It creates a very unique atmosphere that kind of blurs a line between creepy and just kind of normal. If you were to remove Thanatos from it, this would otherwise look like a pretty standard day at school. Or at least it would be until you notice it's as if they're staring right at you. It's almost like you're looking at them from a security camera or something, and they're looking right back. Then there's Thanatos, who's one of my absolute favorite Persona designs, looking awesome. He looks super three-dimensional, as if he's just about to skewer you. It all comes together in an illustration that I think is very indicative of what Persona 3 is all about. Between the school setting, the characters being front and center, as well as the menacing persona, it all works really well as a kind of vertical slice of Persona 3, and I think that's why it stands out as being one of my favorites from Soejima. Now for some Catherine representation, and even though Catherine has some great illustrations all around, there's something about this one that really gets me. It's just kind of classy feeling in a way that contrasts a lot of the other art from the game, which tends to be a lot more overtly sexual. I really like the minimalism of it. There's not really a whole lot going on, but what is there is really striking. First of all, I'm a sucker for the pink background. I tend to like anything which is predominantly pink, and Catherine art tends to be loaded to the brim with the color. Catherine herself is of course front and center, but it's a much more subdued look at the character. Usually she's kind of got her titties all over the place or her lips are front and center, but this one is a lot more kind of low-key. She's flirtatious, but not overly sexual. Kind of just enough to be eye-catching. And it also does a really good job subtly encapsulating the bar setting of the game. The bar stool and drink in her hand are just enough to evoke imagery of the stray sheep. And out of all the Catherine art, this is absolutely the one I would want a poster of the most. Not just because I could hang it up on my wall and not be ridiculed, but like I said a second ago, it's a little bit more classy than some of the other Catherine art. Overall, I think it all just kind of comes together to form something that's simple, but very appealing. For our first bit of Persona 5 art, we have this illustration, and at least to me it stands out as being one of the most iconic pieces of Persona 5 art. It really takes me back to the distant year of 2015. Yes, this art came out that long ago. This was back when any bit of new Persona 5 art, character reveals, trailers, any of that was the talk of the town for weeks on end. It's also a picture that I think does a really good job capturing the essence of Persona 5 and instilling into people what it was all about. Joker sits right in the center, smug as always, with "Let us start the game" proudly displayed on his placard. The mugshot perfectly conveys the thief setup that the game has, and Arsene looks badass as always. Another one of my all-time favorite Persona designs, and the black and red, which is so indicative of Persona 5, is perfectly on display here. Although this is definitely not the oldest piece on this list, I feel like this is the one that kind of gives me the most nostalgia. Takes me back to more innocent times, and it's also just a prime example of Soejima's talent. Here's one from Persona 4 Golden, and even though I tend to prefer art from Personas 3, 5, and the arena games, something about this one really does a lot for me. It's just so vibrant and colorful, and is a great showcase of the wonderful colors that Soejima likes to use. All the characters in Persona 4 have their own sort of color identity, like Chie's green, Yukiko's red, Naoto's blue, and I think the comic-like arrangement really helps to accentuate that. Narukami in the corner looks great with his more subdued black and gray scheme, along with Izanagi looming in the background. Each panel also has its own unique background and texture to it, like the polka dots in Chie and Yukiko spot, the swirl in Rise's, the diamond shapes for Narukami, and it all just kind of flows very nicely. You can look at it from a glance and just appreciate the beautiful colors, or get more personal looking at each individual panel and noticing the finer details. It's a great piece of art all around, and definitely one of my favorites from Persona 4 Golden. Next is the box art of Persona Q, which is a style that I absolutely love. This picture kind of takes me back to the reveal of Persona Q and how exciting it was that the Persona 3 and Persona 4 gangs would be starring in an RPG together. Although I doubt any of us were expecting the style. The sort of chibi look is just great, and it's a lot of fun seeing how all these characters were adapted into the style. For example, Teddy was made even more round and cute, whereas Kanji has been given this really funny tough guy expression. It's just nice seeing such a large roster all represented in this unique style. But out of all these, I think the Q version of Igis is actually my favorite. Something about her ditzy face with the circles in her eyes is really funny to me. I'm also just a big fan of the purple background, which changes from the tile pattern to the labyrinthian shape. All in all, it's just a great illustration with a lot of energy, color, personality, and that Persona Q style, which I love so much. Here's another one from Persona 3 featuring Tartarus. I think this one stands out as being one of the most creepy and surreal pieces that Soejima has done, and it really highlights his ability to draw settings as well as characters. Tartarus is just such a unique looking and terrifying structure. Starting from the very top, we of course see the crescent moon looming over the unsettling green sky. It's as if the entire sky is illuminated by the tower's glow, and you can perfectly visualize the clock striking midnight as the entire world freezes for the dark hour. The structure itself is also just fun to look at. It's such a strange mess of staircases, columns, clocks, and the blood which is just dripping out at certain points. I also appreciate the normal, unlit buildings towards the bottom and foreground since it creates a good sense of distance and scale. Plus, it helps to contrast their normalcy with the supernatural existence of Tartarus. I really enjoy the more creepy art that's found in Persona 3, it perfectly complements the game's tone, and I'm hoping Soejima can kind of flex his creep factor in future projects. Here's another Persona 3 illustration, although you may not recognize the characters that are featured here. That's because this is actually concept art for the game, which was made to pitch Persona 3 to Atlus. It features little more than a boy and a girl, dressed in the same uniforms we'd see in the actual game, holding black cards. In the center, you can of course see the Persona 3 logo, and that's pretty much it. This is by far the most simple piece in this video, and for me it's honestly less about the art itself and more about the idea behind it. Persona 3 is my favorite game, so I'm naturally very interested in its concept art and what could have been. Looking at this art is like a portal into an old reality that no longer exists. One where only the most general idea of Persona 3 existed and very little else. At the time, it was just a game they wanted to make, and this was one of the very first physical pieces of that puzzle. Looking at this art, it kind of makes you wonder what could have been, and that's why this illustration stands out to me. It's the origin point for my favorite video game, and at least for me, that evokes a very unique feeling. Here's some more Persona 5 art, and this is another one that really stands out to me. When I started working on this video, this was pretty much the first one that came to mind. And it honestly might be my favorite piece of Persona 5 art. The Velvet Twins, and especially Caroline, have my favorite designs of any character in the series. So much so that my avatar is of course based on Caroline's outfit. I think a big part of my fascination with their design started with all the early art of the Twin Wardens, and this illustration absolutely still gets me. The bright blue of the Velvet Room perfectly contrasts the usual red and black of Persona 5 art, and Soejima's usage of the color is just amazing. Blue is a color he gets so much usage out of, ranging from the beautiful outfits of the Velvet Attendants to the heavy use of blue in Persona 3, and it's of course used to amazing effect in this art. We have Joker front and center gripping onto the chains, followed by the mysterious but powerful looking Twin Wardens. They look awesome here. It's a subtle sort of authority they display over him with their expressions and posture. Going further in, we can see the brightly lit Igor, and I really love how you can see on the ground the shadows of the bars. It creates a really nice sense of scale and depth. Also, just look at how many bricks there are on the ground. Think about how long it must have taken Soejima to color all of them with so much detail. Like I said, this really is one of my favorite pieces Soejima has ever done. The usage of blue, the Wardens, it's great. Definitely one of the highlights of his entire catalog for me. Here's one I hadn't seen before researching for this video, but I immediately fell in love with it. It's one of the more subtle pieces of Persona 4 art and very unique as a result. While Persona 4 and especially Golden's art is a lot more in your face and colorful, this one goes for a more stylistic and minimalist approach. The visual of Narukami and Izanagi sort of flowing into each other is really cool, and his outstretched arms showing all the other main party members is a great visual. The more subdued look makes me feel weirdly nostalgic for Persona 4 in a way. This is gonna sound like some really weird abstract shit, but it almost makes me feel like these are memories of the characters being put to paper. It's not quite the entirety of the characters, just their heads. Almost like an image you would see in a dream or a fleeting memory. The kind of thing the neurons in your brain would quickly spark up if you were to think about Persona 4. That's kind of how I describe it, and that's why I like it so much. It's different, it's dreamlike, it's abstract, and of course, very beautiful. Prepare for a triple attack of Persona 4 arena art, starting with this visual of Narukami and Igis clashing. This is one of my favorite illustrations from the arena series, and although the main box art of Labrys and Narukami clashing is great, I think this one definitely strikes a lot more of a chord with me. The battle between the Persona 4 cast and some of the Persona 3 characters was one of the main draws of Arena, and I think it gets perfectly represented here. It's a dynamic looking brawl with both sides holding their own. Narukami swings his katana and destroys part of Igis' headphone things, while Igis knocks off his glasses and rips apart his shirt. Bullet casings are flying everywhere. They both have determination and fire in their eyes, and in a way, I think this art is Persona 4 Arena for me. Whenever the topic of the games is brought up, this is usually the first visual that comes to mind. Here's another Persona 4 Arena illustration, and I just had to include a piece with my girl Elizabeth being front and center. I really like this art. It's so funny, cute, and just has this whimsical energy to it that I really appreciate. Elizabeth, of course, looks amazing. She absolutely has one of my favorite designs across the entire series, and you can just tell she's having a lot of fun. She's in such a cute pose, giving Teddy a good whack while cards fly out of her book and Rise cheers her on in the background. The lights flash down on them as Teddy receives the bonking of a lifetime, and Teddy's face is super expressive. Soejima has done this really interesting sort of vibration effect on his eyes with multiple circles. Even though it's a still image, you can perfectly visualize the cartoony effect that he was going for. In fact, it's such a good illustration, I had to double check this picture a few times to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Here's our last piece of arena art, and I chose this extremely unique one of Narukami and Adachi squaring off. One thing I hope I've highlighted here is just how talented Soejima is and how diverse his talents truly are. The man is a champion of drawing colorful pieces, abstract pieces, settings, and of course this. This is one of my favorite depictions of Yu and Adachi's rivalry, as well as their conflicting worldviews. The combination of black, white, and gray really makes this stand out from the more colorful Persona 4 art, and conveys a very serious and dark atmosphere. In spite of that, this seems to be a much less hateful sort of fight, and instead a brawl between rivals, as evidenced by Narukami's slight smirk. As Narukami charges, Adachi readies his oh-so-beloved gun, and the wicked smile on his face is absolutely great. One more bit of Catherine art for the road, and this one definitely stands out as being another one of my favorites, but pretty much for the opposite reason of the first one. Whereas the previous one was kind of stylish, sexy, elegant, this one does a great job highlighting the creep factor of Catherine, which you rarely see represented in the art for the game. There's definitely a few that are pretty unnerving, but I feel like I like, quote-unquote, this one the best. Something about Catherine holding this poor sheep trying to escape while she attempts to lick him is really unsettling. It's a great sort of visual metaphor for the situation that she's put Vincent in. This poor man's just trying to get away, and she's not allowing it to happen. The funny thing is that if you were to remove the sheep, this would otherwise be a somewhat titillating, very nice bit of art. The pink background with the swirly hearts is there, which I absolutely love. Catherine herself looks great. It really is that one sheep that all ties it together. It's another great bit of Catherine art, and absolutely one of my favorites from the game. For our final bit of Persona 5 art, this one was used as the cover for the Japanese Persona 5 art book. Similar to the Persona 4 Golden art from earlier, it adopts a sort of comic book style, with characters in their own panels. And it is absolutely jam-packed with character and cool details. Starting from the right, we of course see the main image of Joker just exploding out of his own panel with this 3D effect that really pops. He's surrounded by Makoto at the library, Akechi looking sus, Ann and Carmen, Haru and Morgana, a very menacing looking picture of Ryuji and his skull getup. The characters are blasting through mementos. Makoto and Yusuke unleash on a fool. The mice forms of the characters burst out of the page. It's just such a fun, whimsical work of art. They all get a little bit of representation, and I think it works as a great little encapsulation of these characters. The final piece of art I wanted to showcase once again features Igis, and it probably has the strangest origin out of any of these. It comes from a promotion Persona did with Lord of Vermilion Re 2, which is some online Final Fantasy card game that we never got. Yeah, I have no idea. But either way, this is one of my favorite Igis illustrations from Soejima, and trust me, there's quite a few of them. Expect more Igis if and when this video gets a sequel. There's just something very powerful about this art of the character. Igis feels like a force to be reckoned with, and the glow emanating from her is really badass. Once again, Soejima has proven himself to be the king of the color blue. The light blue energy comes out of her Papillon heart in waves and flows throughout her machinery. The exposed mechanical bits are awesome, and her parts expanding outwards like that is a really cool effect. Igis is just a character that you can do a lot with. Her robotic existence means that Soejima can kind of tinker around with her for whatever concept he comes up with. Whether he goes for a more humanoid or more mechanical look, she really does stand out as an example of really solid and flexible character design. And I think this art really helps to highlight that. Definitely one of my favorite pieces from Soejima, one of my favorite bits of Igis art, and one that I think shows the character in a very strong light. But yeah, that has been the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I'll see you guys next time.